welcome back to the Boropolis Podcast. Of course, as usual, it is me and Nathan, but for the first time in a while, unfortunately, we do have to speak about a poor defeat for the Boro. Nathan, I always ask you how you are. You still look like you've got somewhat of a grin. It's not all doom and gloom just yet, but we do have to talk about a defeat. So how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, a game on Saturday where we have to talk about a Boro defeat. Haven't had one in a few weeks, but the games are coming thick and fast, and hopefully we can rectify that Tuesday night.
Yeah, as you say, we're in a fortunate position now where I think probably for about, 6 weeks or something, or 4 weeks, we now have Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Tuesday. So it means the Borough players are going to be busy and we're going to be busy with podcasts, but we'll try and keep on top of everything we possibly can. And I think with the amount of games coming up, it's best if we just get into the Bristol game, to be honest. Um, so in terms of the team, Nathan, unchanged from, of course, the Derby victory. I don't think that was really much of a surprise. The only, sort of talking point from the lineups was, of course, Andras Sparrow missing from the squad. I know a few people straight away were a little bit concerned, but it turns out that it was illness and nothing too sinister. So apart from that, I guess you would have been quite happy with the starting 11.
Yeah, I felt that after the last performance against Derby, especially from the centre forwards, Balogun and Connolly, that they performed well enough to keep their places. I think there was a lot of conversation on social media from fans saying, well, where was Sparrow, but also could Watmore have been in the side? But I felt that those two, Balogun and Connolly, probably deserve to keep the places in the side after the performance against Derby, and the rest of the side just speaks for itself really. So I thought it was fair enough to keep it the same again.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to be honest, although perhaps it may have been the game, in hindsight, and of course, hindsight's a wonderful thing, to play Watmore and really put that Bristol defence under more pressure. I think it would have been extremely harsh to drop Balogun or Connolly given their performances in the last game. So, yeah, I think no real surprises in the team lineup. I think we'll just go straight into the action now, really. And in terms of the start from Boro, it probably wasn't as fast as perhaps we may have hoped for, but I did feel like we were on the front foot to start with. Didn't really fashion too many sort of clear-cut chances, or at least what you would call clear-cut chances. But it was Bristol City that took the lead, and it's an avoidable goal looking back at it, isn't it? The ball goes down the right-hand side, and as much as we've given him so much credit, and rightfully so over the past weeks and months, Marcus Tavernier makes the mistake of sort of trying to go shoulder to shoulder with Semenyo. And I think the best way to describe it is he gets absolutely bodied, gets put on the weight. Semenyo then cuts it back for Vyman, and that's 1-0 Bristol City in such a short space of time, really. But nothing really, that you can point towards apart from that sort of, I guess you could call it mistake, but he's just lost out in terms of pure strength in that corner to have there, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's lost that battle there with Semenyo. On the last podcast previewing this game, we mentioned that the forwards, Semenyo and Vyman, who've been Bristol City star men this season, and Semenyo's in a rich vein of form. Very confident at the minute in his own ability, and he's just barged past Tavernier as if he wasn't really there and picked out a fantastic cross. Vyman, fantastic movement to just hang out there, and yeah, he bends that one in the near post past Joe Lumley, and Boro find themselves 1-0 down early on, and from then on, really, I felt we'd probably struggle. Bristol were probably just going to sit back a little bit, soak up pressure, and look to hit Boro on the break, really, with forwards like Semenyo and Vyman possessing quite a lot of pace. So it was always going to be difficult, but there were certainly chances to be had following the goal for Boro.
Yeah, there was, of course, and we'll get onto them now. But once again, Nathan, the curse strikes, we preview the game, speak about some of the, players that we should look out for, players that are in a rich vein of form, and lo and behold, Vyman and Semenyo combined for the first goal. And then, as we'll speak about later, one of those two was on the score sheet again. So I think from now on, as much as it's insightful and, we do it to sort of, for people that might not have a insight into whoever's up against Boro next week and try and explain what their threats might be. I think we're just going to have to scrap that feature because it really seems to bite us in the arse every week, doesn't it now?
It does, yeah. And I saw another interesting stat on Andreas Vyman, to be fair. In his last 2 appearances against Chris Wilder's sides, he's contributed 5 goals, which just proves how much of a danger man he is against Chris Wilder's sides, to be fair. So, yeah, not the nicest stat, and that just goes on us again, that, doesn't it? Naming players, and they always have a worldie against us. But, yeah, hopefully the players that we say later on don't bite us on the backside.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm going to suggest just maybe naming goalkeepers or something like that for the opposition previews. But do you know what? The way it seems to go, I wouldn't be surprised if the goalkeepers managed to bag a few, to be honest. That's just the way this curse works on this podcast. But moving on from obviously the opener, Bristol City's opener, of course, quite quickly after, as you say, I thought as soon as they took the lead, we're in for another Blackburn scenario here where they are going to be happy to just sit back and defend. Of course, they have defensive capabilities. Tim Close is happy to sit on the edge of his box all day and head crosses away. And of course, we all know Thomas Callas and his ability to defend. So it would have been quite easy for them to do that. And I think ideally that's probably what they would have liked to have done. But, straight away we put pressure on them. We're trying to force them into mistakes and really attacking at will. The first real chance after we go 1 down, great pressure from Johnny Howson, as usual, really forces Masengo into passing it back to his goalkeeper, but without looking, he plays it back, and it falls to Connolly, who's really almost 1v1. Slightly to the left onto his weak foot. But, at that stage, he has the ball in a position where it's only Daniel Bentley to beat. And I think it just falls onto his wrong foot, to be honest, because he goes left-footed, doesn't he? And just doesn't manage to whip the ball round Bentley. And, at that point, I was starting to think, yeah, this has all the feelings of a really frustrating game, because that was the perfect chance to level things up quickly, but obviously it wasn't taken.
Yeah, it was. It was a good chance. He did well to anticipate the back pass, to be fair, Connolly. But I think just decision making. I think he tightens the angle up for himself really by going onto his left foot instead of opening up and going on his right and having the full goal to aim at. So I think that really just goes down to his decision making and possibly panicking in the moment. But yeah, it was a very good chance, and it would have levelled the game up and made the game certainly a bit more interesting than Boro just having to chase and get one back.
Yeah, I mean, that chance was probably the most clear cut, I'd say. But, throughout the remainder of the first half, we had sort of those chances that we seem to fashion quite a lot now under Chris Wilder, where it is that little intricate pass on the edge of the box as we sort of go from side to side and fashion good and sort of clear chances rather than, as we spoke about last week, just sort of aimlessly crossing the ball into the box and hoping for the best. I think the best one of those really good work down the right. It come in field. I think Tav tries to have a shot and it sort of fumbles its way through to Connolly. Then a defender gets a touch on it and it works its way back to Tavernier somehow, just falls to him in the box. And to be honest, again, similar to Connolly, he just can't really get his feet sorted quick enough. Tries to go back across Bentley, but the keeper saves, and I think it just loops over the net. But again, in that position, there's certainly eyes to be pointed towards Tav, because, increasingly now he is getting in positions where you think he should be adding to that tally. And even against Derby, late on in the game, he had a few where, we're not talking about shots from sort of outside the box. He's in the box, goalkeeper a beat, and he just can't seem to find at the moment that sort of final cutting edge to just perhaps, calm himself down and just slot it past the keeper.
Yeah, I think it's more just sort of inexperience in those moments, to be fair, with Tavernier. Just needs to have one that falls from where his composure is completely right, and he just calmly slots one in the corner, and I think they'll start floating for him. But yeah, it's another chance that goes begging. But I think really there wasn't all too many chances apart from that Connolly one in the first half, as you say, just very much half chances, and Bristol limited us to those chances really, which was a credit to them in that first half and seeing themselves through till the break 1-0 up.
Yeah, I think one, key incident in the first half, of course, not talking about an attack for either side, but something that's going to affect us, across the next two games. Of course, Matt Crooks picks up a yellow card in the first half, quite, sort of dubious one where I think it could have gone either way, really, but he picks up the yellow card, and of course, that takes him to his 10th booking of the season, but that, of course, does mean he will miss the next two league games, West Brom and Barnsley. As soon as he picked up that booking, you look at the bench and think, well, we do have Riley McGree, but even though we've seen, what McGree can do, he's going to be a big miss in the next two games, isn't he, Matt Crooks?
He is. He gives us a lot of different things, really, from his aerial ability, defending set pieces, and obviously attacking them as well. But also, he's just his play in that midfield three. He gives us that balance with Tavernier and Howson. Quite combative in his defensive work, and also we know all about him going forward as well and creating some sort of chances for the forwards and for himself, really. So, yeah, he'll be a miss, but we've just got to make sure he's ready and refreshed for Tottenham and for Luton following those games against West Brom and Barnsley, and hopefully he'll come back into the side, well, permitting that McGree, I think it'll be McGree anyway, that takes his place, permitting that McGree doesn't have absolute blinders in these games coming up for us.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I guess we've got to hope that McGree does have blinders in the upcoming games, but, it's sort of, if that does happen, it's a nice sort of headache for Chris Wilder to have. So, a perfect opportunity really for Riley McGree. Moving into the second half, really, and before that man McGree was introduced, of course, not for Crooks, who saw out the rest of the game in the second half. But before he was introduced, another good chance for Boro. I feel like in the second half, particularly, we managed to create more sort of clear-cut chances. And as we were saying, Tav picks up the ball on the edge of the box, neatly slides it through to Balogun. And to be honest, I said to you before the game, didn't I? I really felt like Balogun was going to score on Saturday. Of course, I was wrong. But yeah, he goes through, and probably one of the best chances he's had in a Middlesbrough shirt on his right foot, because we do see him, have chances on his left an awful lot. But on his right foot, I thought he was just going to dink it over Bentley's head. But he tries to go low, and it is saved. And I think it's a good save from Bentley rather than a poor finish from Balogun. But probably one of our best chances in the second half, that Balogun chance, Nathan.
Yeah, I think when you're going through on goal like that for a centre forward, you don't want to blaze it. So that's the reason I think he's kept it low. Driven one low and hard. Hasn't tried to dink Bentley as many would say should probably try and do, but again, a missed opportunity. And I think it was obviously being early in the second half that would have got us back into the game, and we'd have been probably pushing for a winner, but it wasn't to be. I think really that second half we were very much on top, but almost like a case of typical Boro, me and you messaging each other during the game, and we're saying how on top we were, and hopefully we could fashion an equaliser, but it was a case of Bristol City going up the other end and doubling the lead, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And, against the run of play, really, because as you see, we were on top for the majority, if not all of the second half. And it comes from a goal kick. Daniel Bentley sort of lofts it upfield. And, something that doesn't really often happen, to be honest. Dale Fry doesn't win the first contact on the goal kick. Chris Martin heads it on. It goes, the ball goes towards Semenyo. And then from that point, it's just pure defending, really. There's a little bit of pressure on him from the Boro defence. I think we do sort of get a foot in a little bit, and then it sort of just breaks towards him again. And he fires from the edge of the box, left-footed, into the bottom corner past Joe Lumley, and of course goes off and celebrates. Another player that, of course, we've already mentioned that we did preview last week. But, immediately as you do, when you're sort of watching the games, at least when you're not in the stadium, you sort of flick on and see what people are saying as we've conceded or as we've scored. And there was a little bit of criticism for Joe Lumley. I mean, to be honest, I think probably a little bit unfair, but I mean, you've seen the goal, of course, you watched the game. Do you think that's a little bit unwarranted, to be honest? I think it's just one of them efforts actually where Semenyo hasn't hit it all that well, but it makes it more difficult for the keeper to save.
Yeah, I think it's quite a poor effort, really. He's just sort of swung his left foot at it and hoped for the best. And it's got a bit of pace on it, but it's not a rocket into the bottom corner. But I think Joe Lumley just probably sees it probably a little bit late with the defenders that are in front of him. And yeah, it trickles into that bottom corner and they're 2-0 up. And I think from then on, really, I couldn't see Boro getting much out of the game. I just thought it was a day that wasn't Middlesbrough's day, unfortunately, with the chances that we had, Connolly and Balogun having two good chances and those not being taken. I thought, this just isn't going to be our day. And yeah, there was the slight little bit of hope, but for me, I thought even though it was quite late and in stoppage time, I thought it was always just going to be a consolation goal from Matt Crooks.
Yeah, of course, he did get that, as you say. It ended up being a consolation in the end, and just so typical, really, that he heads in another one, but he misses the next two games. So, perhaps stopping another run of goals from Crooks. Obviously, he had the goal in the previous game, so hopefully it doesn't completely, ruin any momentum that he was building up in terms of his goal scoring, and he can notch it in the FA Cup again and add to his goal tally for this season. But I think one thing actually, and quite ironically, really, the corners for Boro all day I thought were quite poor from either side. Really failing to beat the first man more often than not. And then it comes to the 92nd minute and Tav puts it on the money for Crooks to head in. And, that's the goal that we do score. But in terms of the game in general now, because as you say, even when we scored, I felt it was probably too late in the day. But in terms of one individual performance, I think, which stands out, and of course, because of the fact that Matt Crooks is going to be suspended the next two games, something that I watched, in particular, I thought Riley McGree, his impact when he was introduced in the second half. Of course, Tav went to left wing back and McGree went to the left of that midfield three. One of the real highlights of the weekend for me, because every time he had the ball, he looked forward, he picked out a few good passes, again, neat on the ball, and just showing really what Chris Wilder's spoken about of why we, in the end, tried so much to nab him from Celtic, as of course we ended up doing.
Yeah, I think coming the side this week, two difficult games against West Brom and Barnsley. I think both sides that we're going to come up against are going to be sides that are going to try and sit in, let Middlesbrough have the ball, and probably just try and hit us on the break, really. So someone like McGree in that midfield will help to break lines, hopefully, link the play between, well, down that left-hand side, should Tavernier be a left wing back, because to be fair, going into the Bristol City game there, when Tavernier was moved to left wing back, I felt that we were more more dangerous going down both sides, really. Of course, I think everyone knows there's an over-reliance on Jones, and he probably wasn't at his best on Saturday. He did have a slight off day to what we usually see, but we can't just rely on him. If he's not having a good day, we can't just sort of just capitulate and not have another plan. So Tavernier going down that left hand side was very interesting to see and provided us a bit of a different outlet. And I think should McGree be in the left side of midfield, although I don't think he will be, I think Tavernier will be back in that midfield three on Tuesday night. I think that we'll just have to see with the link up play. But yeah, McGree was decent, had a good shot as well that was palmed away by Bentley, and to be fair, a good improvised effort from Connolly as well with a little back heel that was saved on the line. But yeah, he looks like a decent little player, McGree, and hopefully we get to see a start from him on Tuesday night.
Yeah, definitely. And, we speak about McGree and speak about that change in the second half in particular. But it was interesting, as you say, because for a while now, it's become apparent that, as you say, we do rely heavily on Isaiah Jones. And to be honest, it hasn't really been an issue because even when we have been, Jones has still been producing these moments of excellence. But against Blackburn, especially, the defeat earlier on this season under Wilder, one of the only three that we've had under Chris Wilder, I should emphasise. I think there was a stat, and it was a percentage of how many times we try to attack from the right and the left. And what is clear to see is, and obviously, because Jones is a natural right winger, he's happy to be in them advanced positions. He's happy to get at his fullback. Whereas when we do go out to the left, and this is no means sort of a dig against Neil Taylor, because he's in there to do a job. He's done an excellent job for me whilst he's been in there, a bit of a steady Eddie, sort of 7 out of 10 every other game. But he doesn't have that ability where Jones does to, beat his fullback and whip across in. So something perhaps, it would mean, of course, McGree could get in the team, and once Crooks is back from his suspension, he could slot back into the right and Tavernier continue as the wing back. It was an interesting sort of change in dynamic because it didn't always feel like we were trying to go down the right. But yeah, did you sort of, from the signs you saw from that team that finished the game, was that something that even when Crooks is back, you'd be quite intrigued to see perhaps start a full game and try and, have that threat from either side as opposed to just Jones on the right?
Yeah, I would be interested to see what that looks like, if I'm honest. I think that it'd certainly be interesting because whilst Taylor hasn't really put a foot wrong, he just doesn't have that natural ability to beat a man that someone like Isaiah Jones or Marcus Tavernier does have. And obviously Tavernier being left-footed, that helps with the balance down that side as well. So I think with his pace and of course his defensive abilities as well, it could be an interesting move to put Tavernier in at that left wing back role. Of course, very energetic, ability to beat a man, pace. I think he has got all the abilities, all the attributes to play there. So yeah, I would be interested to see that. Although there isn't a need to batter Neil Taylor. It's just that he's not that left-sided Isaiah Jones that we'd hopefully have.
Yeah, I think it would be certainly a bit of a masterstroke if we did manage to unearth the left-hand-sided Isaiah Jones. But, just moving on from the game, really, and, we probably haven't gone as in-depth as what we do on Boro Wins. And it's partly because we just want to sort of forget about it and move on. But also because of some of the questions that we were tweeted after the game. I think because of how lucky we've been under Chris Wilder in terms of the results and how quickly things have changed, any defeat now is a bit of a shock to the system almost. There's that out of 16 games, we've been defeated 3 times now. And, it puts it into perspective when you see that the Wordle tweet, and I'll give myself some credit. I thought that was quite good from me, actually. Of the greens and reds and oranges. And there's an awful lot of green, of course, representing the wins we've had. So when there is a defeat, there is that sort of, it's almost like a shock factor where immediately people think, well, who do we blame for this? Because in previous games, we've had sort of no one to blame. Everyone's happy. And straight away, I think a lot of the sort of criticism went towards Lumley, where, to be honest, I don't even think we need to discuss that, because I think it would be completely unfair. We spoke about some of his errors last week, but I don't think he can be blamed for Saturday at all. But the second part of that sort of blame was quickly shifted towards the forward line. And we got a question in from Nick Beale, and he asked, in hindsight, did we actually strengthen in January? Now, for me, I think it's certainly probably too early to say, but there is question marks about perhaps Connolly and Balogun as a pair, and it sort of ties in. I was going to ask this as 2 questions, but I'll sort of chuck it at you as one instead. Andrew also asks about sort of what does Duncan Watmore have to do to get a start at the moment. Do you think the additions of Connolly and Balogun have strengthened us in terms of, when they play as a 2, is that your preferred sort of strike force in the formation that we play? But also, if it isn't, do you think, as much as we have to manage his minutes, that Duncan Watmore should be having more of an involvement at the moment, where he doesn't really seem to be, he's in and out of the team very much, and more being used as a substitute at the moment?
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting question. I think that really still our best partnership up front is Andras Sperrar and Duncan Watmore. The 2 lads we've brought in, Connolly and Balogun, are both only young lads. Connolly's 22 now, 21 when he signed for the club, and Balogun is 20, I'm sure he is. So both young lads looking to get experience under the belts and get some confidence flowing through themselves. I think that those 2 are strikers that fit the way Chris Wilder wants to play. So Chris Wilder will argue with anyone that we have strengthened because they fit the style of play better than someone like a Uche Ikpeazu would. So I think that answers that question. But with regards to Watmore, there's been talk over the last month of him having to manage his minutes for a knock that he's had. So I think once he's fully fit and firing, I think we will begin to see him back in the side a bit more often. But I think with pretty much all of our strikers, it's certainly interesting with all of them, where I think that the chances they get, they take the difficult ones, but the easier chances that they get, they seem to miss. Like, I'm looking back at Duncan Watmore, for example, Huddersfield, his second goal at Huddersfield, where he's lofted it over Lee Nichols, is a fantastic finish. But then you move on to the next week at Stoke, and he misses from 6 yards, a sitter. So I think with all of our strikers, you can give or take any for finishing ability, really. I think that they're all relatively inconsistent with close range finishing, although Watmore did score the other day against Derby. But for what he gives with his press, I think Watmore is a bit further ahead of Balogun and Connolly, and maybe that's just coming from his experience and knowing when to press and when to sit in. But
yeah, I think I'd agree with you on that, and certainly I think, perhaps the fact that we would sort of, and I agree with you, I do think at the moment, Sperrar and Watmore, of course, we didn't have the luxury of having Sperrar to choose from as well at the weekend through illness. but it seems as though he will be back for Tuesday night game against West Brom. But possibly down to the amount of minutes that, Watmore and Sparrow have had, because under Chris Wilder, really, it's been those two for the majority of his time and the majority of games. So they've had the experience of knowing who's going to make what run at what time, and, what sort of typically they do in certain situations. But I think, a lot of people at the weekend I saw again sort of jump and criticise Aaron Connolly when, and this is not me singling one out. I actually thought, out of the two, Connolly probably was actually more effective at the weekend than Balogun perhaps was. And for me, Balogun at the moment, it can't be questioned his ability. We saw it in flashes, in every substitute appearance he's made, he's affected the game, I feel. We saw with the 2 assists against Derby and Coventry that he has that ability to pick out that final pass and show that quality as to why Arsenal fans, really, really do see a huge future for Flo Balogun. But at the moment, I feel like he's just desperate for that one goal, sort of similarly to what you said about Aaron Connolly a few weeks back, that, if he does get one, he'll probably settle himself down and then go on and get a few more. And I do think that is the case with Balogun. I think once he scores one, he can then relax and play his game. But certainly, I think, although we have sort of changed, I guess, almost straight out on El Hernandez and Uche for Aaron Connolly and Balogun, as you say, I think we've strengthened due to the fact that them two strikers fit the system that we play. And although it can certainly be argued, and to be honest, I don't really want to get drawn into it because I feel like we sort of covered the whole situation already. But I think it's just a case of, as you say, Nathan, I don't think we are particularly blessed with a natural finisher, someone that goes through on goal and you think, yeah, I can sort of sit back in my chair now and just think, well, that'll be a goal. I don't think any of the 4 strikers, and, I don't really include Josh Coburn because although he's been involved, I think it's the 4 of Connolly, Balogun, Watmore and Sparrow that are, first picks when they're available, aren't they? So, yeah, I think it is just simply a case of often from now until the end of the season, we'll see that 4 rotated in different 2s and substituted throughout games. And it's just going to be a case of seeing which 2 work the best out of the players that we have available. But then again, as we've seen with Watmore, we're going to have to watch his minutes and the amount of football that's coming up. All of them are probably going to get their chance. So it'll certainly be interesting to see how that little situation pans out moving forward. And moving forward, of course, in terms of games, a huge game. And it would have already been a huge game because, West Brom have an abundance of quality given they were in the Premier League last season. But because of the fact that we were beaten at the weekend, it sort of multiplied how big this game is. Of course, West Brom at home on Tuesday night. I think there's only one place we can really start, Nathan, because we spoke about him in the Reading preview. For those that have listened previously, you know who I'm about to mention. Of course, Andy Carroll made the switch from Reading to West Brom during January. He's already scored against us at the Riverside once this season. He's been playing for West Brom as their sort of lone striker, target man. He knows Steve Bruce well already. I think anyone will be lying if they don't say they are terrified at the thought of him scoring another on Tuesday night, Nathan, and I know you'll feel exactly the same.
Yeah, been saying it to everyone I know pretty much that Boro are going to have to score 2 on Tuesday night because he will undoubtedly get his customary goal at the Riverside, won't he? He hasn't just scored 1 this season, he scored 1 this year and we're only 2 months in. So we're just going to have to hold out hope that Dale Fry, who, to be fair, had a good game against Reading, earlier on in the season, Mark and Andy Carroll, just gets the better of him in that one aerial duel that Andy Carroll will get, because it's all he needs. He only needs one aerial ball, and he'll bury one in the corner. He's certainly a very big threat, but they have players alongside him that are also big threats. I think Karlan Grant is their top scorer this season, and Callum Robinson as well. Both very good players at this level, possessing bags of pace, the pair of them. And yeah, we've just got to hope that we're able to combat them. But yeah, they're certainly struggling at the minute under Steve Bruce.
Yeah, they are, and as you say there, which leads me quite nicely into what I'm about to say. And to be honest, I am a little bit hesitant to say it because typical Boro and all that. They've picked up 1 point from the 3 games that Steve Bruce is in charge, from the form that they have been in under Bruce and, of course, the previous manager. They've slid down to 11th in the table, but that is no means me sort of criticising or mocking them at all, because I am aware that there is football gods, and if they are listening, West Brom are a great side, and I have total respect for everything that they've done this season, because it seems as though, you'd put us as favourites for this game, but knowing Middlesbrough the way that we do, Nathan, and the way that everyone does, I've already seen a few people saying on social media that this game feels a little bit that you were, one of those games that you approach with caution, because they certainly do have quality throughout the team.
They do, yeah. It's quality in abundance, really, and it just hasn't gone for them this season. Initially, when they appointed Valérien Ismaël, who did a very good job at Barnsley last season, I thought that it was a strange appointment, if I was honest. He had a good 6 months at Barnsley, managing a club that had relatively zero expectation upon it, and he dragged them to the playoffs, playing a style of football that worked for them, but it was horrible to watch. I'm not going to paper over the cracks there. It was awful to watch, and he's tried to do that same exact style of play at West Brom, where the expectation is bounce back to the Premier League at the first time of asking. They have a very good side, with quality in forward, defensive and midfield areas. He brought in Barnsley's captain Alex Mort, who was in the Championship team of the season last year, and he tried to, as I say, play that exact same style of football that he did at Barnsley, and the West Brom fans probably rightfully turned an eye to it, really. Attendances dwindled, and they sort of hounded him out, but the results weren't going for them either, and they've appointed Steve Bruce, which is probably a relatively similar appointment, if I'm honest. But we've just got to do the business tomorrow. We've come off the back of a defeat against Bristol, where we had a bit of an off day, didn't take our chances, and tomorrow it's a chance to rectify it, take the chances that we get, and hopefully get a big result against a side that have a lot of quality in this division and probably shouldn't be where they are in this division at this moment in time.
Yeah, and just to touch on another player who Middlesbrough fans know very well, of course, Adam Reach is into the team at the moment. Of course, I was thinking perhaps why all of a sudden he's come into the team, and then made the connection. Of course, Steve Bruce had Adam Reach during that season where at Sheffield Wednesday, of course, where anything that Reach sort of touched just flew in the top corner. So that's another interesting sort of little narrative to look at. Of course, we've already got the Andy Carroll one, but, as we've seen in previous years, Adam Reach loves scoring against Middlesbrough. So maybe we might have to score 3 goals. I can already see the disappointment and sort of concern on your face, Nathan. So I think it's best we move on to next Saturday's game before we sort of crawl into a ball and cry at the thought of Andy Carroll. Um, Barnsley at the weekend, away, of course, the bottom side in the division. As you've just mentioned, at the start of this season, everyone sort of thought that, they might probably not get to the level that they reached last season, playing that dreadful stuff that they did play, if I say so myself. But they might, be mid-table and maybe make pushes throughout the season at those playoffs again. Of course, they lose Alex Mauer, as you say, who's at West Brom. And, of course, mainly they lose Valerian Ismail to West Brom. I don't think anyone foresaw Barnsley season going as bad as what it has done up until this point. They've won 1 out of the last 8 games. As I say, sitting bottom of the league. I think a lot of their fans, judging by social media, have actually accepted already that they're sort of done for and should just start planning for next season. But again, as a very cautious Middlesbrough fan, and I'll openly say that, it stinks of a game where, if I know anything about this club, it won't be an easy game for us.
It won't. Barnsley, of course, down there fighting for their lives still. They pulled off a shock result last week, beating QPR at home at Oakwell, which I think everyone looked at and was like, how's that happened? I think Barnsley have only won 2 or 3 games all season. But yeah, we know Middlesbrough's record going to Oakwell. It's a ground where the away end will be sold out, as it always is when we go there. It's a fantastic away day. But in recent years, the performances from Middlesbrough at that ground haven't been up to scratch. But this team needs to put in a performance on Saturday. I've been in that away end at Barnsley many times when things sort of get a bit sour. I don't think there will be this Saturday, especially with the last few results. But it seems that we always play Barnsley at a bad time. But I think now it's a bit of a good time to play them. They just come off the back of conceding the 93rd minute winner at Coventry at the weekend, which is certainly a bit of a sickener for them. But yeah, hopefully we go into the game with the right attitude. Although they are bottom of the league, we need to go in there with the right attitude and take our chances, the ones that we create, because they're certainly going to want to sit in and catch us on the break, as most sides in the division do, that are loitering around that bottom of the table. So certainly a game that will not be easy, despite looking on paper that Middlesbrough are the favourites. So yeah, hopefully a good professional performance will do, and Boro will get 3 points on the road.
Yeah, hopefully, and as you say, historically and certainly in recent history, there has been a few, Mowbray walking back past those away fans after, I can't even find the words to describe how bad it was performance away before he was sacked. And to be honest, I still wake up in cold sweats during the night at times thinking of that trip away to Barnsley under Jonathan Woodgate, where once again Rudy Gestede decided he was a kung fu fighter and sort of started taking it upon himself to have a pop at the fans, despite his wonderful contribution at Middlesbrough. So hopefully, and I'm almost sure that this will not be the case when we go to Oakwell on Saturday, as you say. But I think that's probably a good note to leave it on, to be honest, because I don't want to speak about Rudy Gestede and his antics for any longer, because, as I say, it'll send me into a horrible place of thinking about that season under Jonathan Woodgate. But yeah, quite a quick podcast from us this week, of course, but, plenty of football coming up, plenty of podcasts for me and Nathan to do, and hopefully plenty of Boro wins to talk about. But yeah, for another time this season, another podcast ticked off. And thank you very much for watching and listening. As I always do say, please subscribe to us on YouTube. Leave us a nice review on any audio platforms that you are listening in on. And from me and Nathan, once again, thank you very much for watching and listening to the Boropolis Podcast. And we will see you again next week.